The morning light fell softly through the wide hospital windows of Crestview Private Hospital. Nurse Lily Summers moved quietly down the hall, her neat white shoes making almost no sound on the floor. She was known as the Timid nurse. Her voice was soft, and she blushed whenever someone spoke to her too warmly. But behind her quiet face was a very kind heart and a calm strength that people did not always see. Lily nodded. She had learned sign language during her training years. It had always touched her heart to see another way of communication, a world made of hands and sight instead of sound. Now she stood outside the room, holding the patient's file close to her chest. She took a deep breath, fixed her cap, and stepped inside. Mrs. Hale sat near the window with quiet grace, her gray hair neatly tied back, her eyes sharp and observing. She looked up when Lily entered. The silence in the room was thick. Not awkward, but still and deep. Lily smiled shyly, then raised her hands and signed slowly. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale. I am your nurse. I'm happy to see you." The small exchange built a bridge faster than any words could have done. What Lily did not know was that someone was watching from behind a glass window across the corridor. It was Mrs. Hale's son, Ethan Hale. He was a tall man with calm gray eyes and the posture of someone used to power. He was the chief executive of Hell Industries, a company well known for its success and for his strict ways of leadership. Many called him cold. Some called him brilliant. But at that moment he was neither. He was simply a man standing still, surprised by the sight in front of him. "You make this place feel like peace." Ethan turned away from the window. Something in his chest tightened. It was not business or logic. Ethan Hale sat in his office the next day, high above the busy city. The walls were made of glass and steel, shining with the morning light. He looked over reports and business plans, but his mind was somewhere else. The picture of the timid nurse in his mother's room kept returning again and again. Her hands had moved gently when she spoke in sign language, her eyes kind and full of care. He had not seen his mother smile that way in years. It puzzled him how such a small moment could stay in his mind. Ethan was a man of control. He made decisions worth millions without hesitation, yet the memory of one quiet nurse had made his thoughts wander. He told himself it was because of his mother, that he was glad someone treated her with respect. But deep down he knew it was not just that. At the hospital, Lily Summers arrived early as always. She carried a notebook with her, where she kept written signs and simple drawings to help when words were hard. She looked forward to seeing Mrs. Hale again. The older woman had a gentle humor that reminded Lily of her late grandmother. There was something special about her eyes, proud but kind. When Lily entered the room, Mrs. Hale greeted her with a smile and quick signs, asking how her morning had been. Lily replied cheerfully that she had missed breakfast because the bus had come late. And Mrs. Hale laughed silently, shaking her head as if to say the nurse should learn to wake up earlier. The air between them felt easy now. What had been new and formal yesterday felt warm today. Ethan decided to visit during his lunch break, told his assistant he wanted to check on his mother's recovery, and walked through the hospital with a firm stride that made people step aside. But as he neared the room, he slowed down. Through the half-open door, he heard nothing. He only saw the sight of his mother talking with her hands, and Lily responding with quick, gentle movements. The quiet scene made him stop for a moment. He entered at last, clearing his throat softly so they would notice him. Mrs. Hay looked up in surprise, then broke into a wide smile. She signed something fast to Lily, who smiled shyly and stood. Lily thought he was another visitor or a family friend. Ethan nodded politely and thanked her for taking such good care of his mother. His voice was calm, deep, but kind. Lily said it was her job and she was happy to help. He stayed for a short time, asking questions about his mother's medicine, pretending to take mental notes, though his attention kept drifting to Lily as she worked. She was careful with every movement, folding a towel neatly, checking the chart with quiet focus. When she smiled, he noticed how it reached her eyes. After he left, he could not stop thinking about her again. He was not used to such distraction. He tried to ignore it by diving back into meetings, but in the middle of a discussion about contracts, his mind replayed the way his mother had laughed silently that morning. He realized Lily had brought light into the old woman's world in a way no doctor had managed. That evening, Mrs. Hale had dinner with her son in her hospital room. She signed lazily between bites. "You looked at the nurse today more than you looked at your files." Ethan pretended to frown, replying aloud that she was mistaken. But Mrs. Hale smiled knowingly and signed back, "She is a good one. Do not let your pride hide your eyes." He could not help but laugh softly and shake his head. Lily, unaware of the small conversations about her, walked home under the pink sky. She thought about Mrs. Hale and how sweet the older woman had been. It gave her a sense of purpose that was bigger than any paycheck. Yet in the back of her mind, she kept remembering the tall man who had visited, his calm voice and careful gaze. There had been something guarded in his eyes, like walls built around years of loneliness. The next day, Ethan found a reason to stop by again. He told himself it was business, since the hospital was connected to some of his company's charities. But his steps turned toward his mother's floor again. He found Lily reading something to his mother, showing pictures from a magazine and signing details of the stories. His mother looked happy, her shoulders relaxed, and Ethan stopped just to enjoy the rare sight. When Lily noticed him, she offered a small nod. Ethan sat near the window to speak with his mother while Lily checked her vitals. Their conversation was short, but the silence after was strangely comfortable. When Lily smiled at his mother's small jokes, Ethan caught himself smiling too. For the first time in years, he did not mind staying quiet. That night, as the lights of the city glowed outside his apartment, Ethan realized something unusual. He wanted to see the timid nurse again. Not because of duty, not because of gratitude, but because her calm presence had touched something honest inside him. Across the city, Lily lay in bed replaying the day, wondering why her heart had been beating faster each time Mrs. Hale's son had spoken to her. Both fell asleep thinking of a stranger who had somehow begun to matter. The days at Crestview Private Hospital grew steady and calm. Lily Summers visited Mrs. Hale every morning and stayed by her side through most of the day. They had formed a quiet friendship that needed no sound. Sometimes they would have small conversations in sign language. Other times they would just sit together and enjoy the stillness while the sun drifted through the curtains. Mrs. Hale had grown stronger and happier, and the doctor said she would soon be well enough to leave the hospital. Ethan visited often, at first pretending it was only to check on his mother's progress. But everyone around him noticed his visits had become more frequent. The nurses whispered among themselves about the serious man in the fine suits who always stopped by one room with soft eyes. He always looked different there, less like a boss and more like a son. One afternoon, the sky turned heavy with dark clouds. Rain began to fall, and the sound filled the hospital halls. Lily was in Mrs. Hale's room helping her read a letter from an old friend. The raindrops tapped against the window, making the room feel cozy and safe. Suddenly, Mrs. Hale's hand trembled as she tried to sign. Her face turned pale, and her body leaned forward weakly. The letter slipped from her hand to the floor. Lily's heart jumped in panic, but her training took control. She caught Mrs. Hale gently and laid her back down on the bed. The monitor beside her started to beep in warning. Lily checked her pulse, which felt faint and irregular. Her mind raced through her training. She pressed the red call button and spoke clearly into the intercom for immediate help. Then she began to act quickly. She lifted Mrs. Hale's head slightly, adjusted the oxygen tube, and rubbed her hand softly in reassurance. Even as fear tried to creep into her chest, Lily kept her voice steady, though Mrs. Hale could not hear her. She signed calmly, "Stay with me. You are safe. Help is coming." Her hands moved smoothly, her face full of determination. The older woman looked at her and tried to sign something weakly, but Lily shook her head and smiled, trying to keep her calm. Within moments, 2 doctors and another nurse rushed in. Lily explained what had happened while she helped check vital signs and prepare the equipment. The team worked together, giving medicine and adjusting the monitor. The beeping slowly returned to a steady rhythm. Relief filled the air. When Ethan arrived a few minutes later, out of breath from running down the corridor, the crisis had just passed. Lily stood beside his mother's bed, her uniform slightly wrinkled, her hands still trembling from the rush. He froze in the doorway, his chest tight with fear, then looked at his mother. The doctor assured him she was stable now and out of danger. Ethan thanked the medical team, but his eyes stayed on Lily. The nurses quietly left the room, leaving the 3 of them alone. He stepped closer and said softly, "You saved her." Lily shook her head and smiled, replying that it was the doctors and the quick help from everyone. But Ethan's eyes showed that he knew better. He had seen how pale his mother was when he arrived and how safe she looked now under Lily's care. Mrs. Hale opened her eyes slightly and saw her son. She smiled weakly and signed something that made him blink. Lily translated her words aloud without thinking. She says, "Do not look so scared." Then Mrs. Hale pointed at her son and at Lily together and signed again. Lily hesitated, but finally said the words with a shy smile. "She says you should thank me with something nicer than words." Mrs. Hale smiled faintly before drifting back into rest. Ethan let out a small laugh, but his voice was tight with emotion. He turned to Lily and said quietly, "I don't know how to thank you." Lily straightened her shoulders, her modest bravery returning. "You already did," she said. By caring so much for her, hearing her words struck something deep inside him. Later that evening, when the storm had faded, the hospital grew peaceful again. Lily walked past the wide windows, looking out at the wet streets, shining under streetlights. Her thoughts were still with Mrs. Hale, hoping she would recover fully. She did not notice Ethan standing a few steps away until he spoke. "I never really got to thank you," he said. His tone was gentle, not like the powerful businessman she had imagined from the magazines she had seen in waiting rooms. "It's part of my job," she answered quietly. Her lips curved in a small smile. "I only did what anyone would do. Not everyone would," he said. For a moment they stood in silence. The rain outside had slowed to a soft drizzle. He looked at her with a kind of respect that felt new to both of them. That night, Ethan stayed late by his mother's side. Mrs. Hale woke for short moments, signing to him about the importance of small acts and real hearts. He understood that she meant Lily. He also understood that his mother was happier than she had been in years. In her small apartment across town, Lily sat by the window, her hands still remembering the signs she had used in the rush of the afternoon. Her heart was still racing, not only from fear, but from something warmer that had grown quietly inside her. She thought of the look in Ethan's eyes when he had thanked her and wondered why it made her smile to remember it. The city was quiet, and for the first time in a long while, she felt that something good was beginning beyond her daily life in the hospital. A week passed after the night of the storm. Mrs. Hale was slowly getting better, her color returning, her movements stronger. Lily Summers still came every day, helping her walk a little around the room, making sure she ate well and rested often. The bond between them had grown gentle and steady. Mrs. Hale had started calling Lily by signing the word for sunshine. It made Lily blush every time, but she secretly liked it. Ethan visited early in the mornings before work and again in the evenings after meetings. He always found his mother in good spirits, usually smiling as Lily helped her practice short steps. Each time he entered, Lily greeted him politely, her shy smile never failing to stir something quiet inside him. He often sat near the window, pretending to check emails, while really watching them from the corner of his eye. He told himself it was simply gratitude keeping him nearby, though his heart knew better. One morning, Mrs. Hale was well enough to return home. The doctors were pleased with her recovery. Ethan helped make all the arrangements for her discharge. Lily stood beside the older woman as she sat ready to leave the hospital. When Ethan came into the room to sign the final papers, Mrs. Hale took both their hands and smiled. She signed a small message, which Lily translated aloud. She says she wants me to visit her someday. Ethan smiled a little and said softly, "You will always be welcome in our home." Lily thanked him, but looked down, unable to meet his eyes for long. There was a strange warmth in her chest that she did not understand. After they left, the room felt too quiet. 2 days later, a delivery arrived for Lily at the hospital. It was a bouquet of white lilies tied with a blue ribbon. Her name was written neatly on a small card tucked inside. The note said only, "Dinner tonight." Ellie stared at it for a long time. She wondered if she should go, or if it was wrong. But something told her it was more than manners behind this invitation. That evening, she stood at the doorway of a quiet restaurant downtown, her hands slightly shaking. She almost turned back, but then she saw Ethan stand up from a table near the window. He was dressed neatly, but without the cold business look she had expected. His expression was nervous too, which made her smile. "I did not know if you would come," he said when she approached. "I was not sure I should," she answered honestly. "I did not want you to feel you had to thank me this way." He shook his head and said, "I did not ask you here because of that. I asked because I wanted to talk to you without the hospital around us." His tone was plain and sincere. They sat down, and at first neither spoke much. The waiter brought them warm food, and slowly they began to talk. Ethan told her stories about his mother's younger years, how she had loved music before she lost her hearing. Lily smiled and shared small pieces of her own life, how she had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but found herself drawn to caring for people instead. He listened carefully, more attentively than anyone had ever listened to her before. Noticed how his voice softened when he spoke about his mother, how his laughter sounded almost surprised, as if he was not used to it. At some point, he admitted the truth that he had watched her that first day through the glass window. Lily's eyes widened, her fork frozen in her hand. "You saw that?" she asked, her face turning red. "I did," he said. "You were speaking to my mother in silence, yet there was more kindness in the air than I had heard in years." That moment stayed with me. Lily laughed softly, embarrassed but touched. "I was only doing my job." "Then you do it better than anyone I have ever met," he replied simply. The evening passed gently, with small talk turning into heartfelt conversation. When they finally stood at the entrance, the city lights shone behind them. Ethan hesitated for a moment before saying, "I know this may seem sudden, but I would like to see you again, outside the hospital, as ourselves." Lily looked up at him, unsure but smiling faintly. "I think I would like that too," she said in a quiet voice. He smiled back and offered his hand, not in a formal way but kindly, as if asking for trust. She shook it, feeling her heart beat quicker. Then they went their separate ways, both walking slower than usual, not wanting the evening to end. That night, as Lily prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about him more than she expected. She remembered how his eyes had softened when he spoke, how different he seemed from the image the world had of him. Across the city, Ethan sat by his mother, who had stayed up reading. She looked up at him and asked with signs if he had a pleasant dinner. He smiled in answer, and she nodded knowingly. In their own quiet rooms, Both felt something new and unspoken. It was not loud or sudden, but gentle and sure, like a thread starting to form between two hearts that had never known each other before. Spring came early that year, and Mrs. Hale had returned home fully recovered. Her garden behind the large house was filled with new blooms of white tulips and roses. The sun was warm, and the air carried the smell of fresh grass. She often sat outside in her chair, reading or enjoying the sight of birds landing on the fence. Every afternoon, Lily Summers came to visit her, just as she had promised. The visits had started with careful politeness, but soon grew into something warmer. Lily helped Mrs. Hale with her exercises, and sometimes cooked small meals for her. They shared many hours of quiet laughter, speaking through signs and simple looks. When Ethan came home from work, he often found them talking under the shade of the old tree. It had become a picture that eased his long days. Ethan's world had changed without him noticing how. Still worked hard, still handled meetings and phone calls, but everything began to feel different. The company no longer seemed like his whole life. He started coming home earlier, sometimes bringing small treats from the city bakery because his mother liked them and because Lily always smiled when she saw them. The house felt alive again. The sound of silence that had once filled the halls was now replaced with the rustle of laughter and signs passed across the room. Even the workers around the house looked happier. Mrs. Hale, who had once spent most of her days alone with her books, now waited excitedly for Lily to arrive. She called her sunshine every morning and always made sure there were fresh flowers on the table before Lily came. One day Ethan came home early and found Lily in the garden with his mother. They were planting seeds together, their hands covered in dirt. The sight made him pause on the stone path. The timid nurse he had first met at the hospital looked free and happy now, her laughter silent but full of light. His mother noticed him standing there and waved him over. He joined them, kneeling down beside them in his dark trousers, which quickly became stained. Lily looked up at him in surprise and said gently that he would ruin his clothes. Ethan only smiled and said that clothes could be cleaned, but time with family could not be replaced. Mrs. Hale laughed, clapping her hands quietly. The three of them spent the rest of the afternoon working in the garden. When they finally sat down with cool lemonade, Ethan watched Lily talk to his mother with her hands moving gracefully in the sunlight. He thought of how much she had changed his world. Somewhere inside, he knew this was no simple gratitude. He had begun to love her. As the days went on, Ethan and Lily grew closer. At first, they met only by chance during her visits, but then he started asking her to stay for dinner. They spoke about small things, about the city, about books, about his mother's stubbornness and Lily's early mornings at the hospital. The more they talked, the more they learned how easy it felt to be together. One evening, as the light turned golden, Ethan asked Lily to walk with him through the garden. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and the air smelled of new leaves. They stopped near the bench under the old tree where his mother liked to sit. Ethan looked at her and said quietly that he had never expected someone like her to walk into his life. Lily looked embarrassed but smiled. "You make it sound like I did something special," she said softly. "You did," he replied. "You brought peace to my mother and to me, reminded me what kindness looks like." For a few seconds, they simply stood in silence. Then Ethan reached for her hand. She hesitated but did not pull away. The moment was calm and certain. She looked at him and saw no hint of the cold businessman, only the man who had once stood helpless at his mother's bedside. From that day, their bond grew quietly but deeply. Mrs. Hale pretended not to notice at first, though her knowing smiles often made them blush. She was simply happy that her home was filled with warmth again. She watched them through the window one evening as they sat in the garden sharing stories. Lily's laughter glowing under the moonlight, and felt a deep peace settle inside her. Months later, the garden was in full bloom. Friends and family came often, drawn to the gentle happiness that seemed to rest around the house. Lily had left the hospital to become Mrs. Hale's private nurse for a time, though she often said it felt less like work and more like living among friends. Ethan often helped her in small ways, fixing tools, carrying baskets of flowers, and sometimes sitting beside her in quiet contentment. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Mrs. Hale called them both to her side. She signed slowly, her eyes shining. She told them that love is strongest when it is built on care and trust, not on wealth or charm. Lily felt tears gather in her eyes, and Ethan nodded, understanding the truth of her words. That evening, the three of them sat under the tree, watching the sky turn soft orange. There was no need for many words. The warmth around them said enough.